Hi there, this is Matt with ot3d.org. This video is the first in a series of videos that I'll be making designed to teach occupational therapy practitioners, educators, and students about applications for 3D printing in their practice. My goal is to provide videos, resources, and instructional templates that help walk you through the process of using a 3D printer. Since you're already here, you found the first video. This being the first video, I want to go over a few basics before we dive in. So the first question you might have, and the first one that I'll be answering, is what is 3D printing? So I'll be going with the definition from Autodesk.com. 3D printing, also called additive manufacturing, is a family of processes that produces objects by adding materials in layers that correspond to successive cross-sections of a 3D model. Plastics and metal alloys are the most commonly used materials for 3D printing, but it can work for nearly anything, from concrete to living tissue. So next, I'd like to walk you through what the process looks like if you're just getting started. I don't want to get bogged down in too much detail. The first thing that you'll need to do is think about what you'd like to make. Depending on your setting and your needs, this could be a toy, a functional piece of assistive technology, or something of your own creation. If you have an idea, you have 3 possible routes that you can really go down. So the first option that I'd like to talk to you about is looking for Premade Files. There are a bunch of websites. Some that come to mind are Thingiverse.com, Makers Making Change. These organizations offer files for free and have large user bases that have contributed to them. Chances are you can find something close to your desired project with just a few searches. Note that for whatever reason, websites that host 3D prints are not known for great search functions, so try out a few different terms, keywords. If you don't immediately find what you're looking for, I promise you there's something that's either exactly what you're looking for or something close that might fit your project that's already out there. So the second option that I'd like to introduce is having a custom file made. There are a couple different ways that you could go about this. While I personally have not gone this route, it's certainly something to be aware of. Some websites like Fiverr can give you access to individuals with 3D modeling experience, where you can present your idea and help bring it to fruition, although there's generally a cost associated with these kinds of services. In exchange, you get almost exactly what you're looking for each time. Makers Making Change has a forum that allows users to post ideas for designs, but with this, there's no guarantee that comes with posting your idea. You may not necessarily get a response because it's volunteer-based. If you opt for a paid service, I would highly recommend doing a little research on the service provider to make sure they're not only reputable, but capable of helping you with your design. Now, the last option that I'd like to talk about is the one that I would personally recommend. If you can't find what you're looking for as an existing file on Thingiverse or any of those other websites. While this might sound a little bit intimidating at first, I promise that it's something that you can pick up, and I'll be making a few videos on software that'll work for beginners and beyond. Once those videos are uploaded, I'll be sure to link them in the description below. Just to touch on a few that are pretty straightforward, Fusion 360 and another Autodesk product called Tinkercad are ones that I'm relatively familiar with and highly recommend to people who are starting out, and I'll be doing some instructional videos that incorporate design aspects of those services. Now, if you're using any of these services, whether it be free or paid for, the file type that you're going to be looking for is something called .stl or .obj file, which essentially just shows the object in 3 dimensions and can be interpreted by the software that we'll be talking about here in a minute. So once you have your file, you'll need to import it into a program called a slicer. The slicer software's job is to take the 3D shape that you're using, that STL or OBJ file that we mentioned previously, and to turn it into a file that can be understood by a 3D printer or G-code. There are a few important settings that you'll want to be aware of going into a print. I'll be using Prusa Slicer, although there are other slicers that are available for free like Cura. The first thing that I'm going to check is that I have the right printer selected. This tells the slicer how big the print can be and other useful information about the stats of the printer that we'll be using. Next, I'll check the temperature that we'll be printing at, and in this instance, I'll be using PLA, which is marked for a range of around 200 degrees. When I select PLA, the program automatically chooses a temperature, although you can adjust this manually if you run into problems or are troubleshooting. Next, you'll want to choose an infill percentage. This effectively determines how much of the inside of your print is plastic and how much is air. By selecting 20% infill, I'll have roughly 20% of the inside composed of plastic in a pattern that I select. The larger your print and the higher the infill percentage, the longer the print will take. While having more infill generally makes for stronger prints, there are diminishing returns around 50% infill. For most of these prints, I would recommend a gyroscopic or cubic infill pattern just for the strength component of it. The final major consideration that you'll want to take into account is supports. Supports help to support areas that have overhang that could otherwise droop or mess up your print. So 3D printers, you're working against gravity, having a base to support on will sometimes help. Changing the orientation of the print on your print bed can change where the supports are required and potentially make your prints quicker and use less material. Once you're done adjusting these settings, you can slice your print down here and save it onto a storage device that works for your printer. In this instance, I'll be using a micro SD card, but these can also be SD cards, USBs, anything that works for your particular printer. This is where it'll be saved as a G-code file that tells what the printer to do and when to do it. So up next, let's talk about the 3D printer itself. For demonstration purposes, I'll be using this little Prusa Mini that's at my local makerspace. Now functionally, this printer works the same as any other 3D printer that uses plastic filament. This printer is an FDM printer, or Fused Deposition Modeling Process Printer. There are a few different kinds of 3D printers and materials that can be used, and I'll be linking a video below that explains some of these differences once I have it complete. This particular printer will be using PLA filament, as we talked about in the slicer settings, as it's our raw material to create the 3D object that we selected earlier. Once I insert the flash drive here and turn the printer on, I can then tell the printer to start on the sliced file that we made earlier. The printer will then start heating up its bed, this area down here, which is what the print will end up sticking to, as well as its hot end. This is the piece that actually heats up and melts the filament into this hot, pliable plastic that can be stacked on top of each other using those slices that we made previously. The printer will then start an initial layer and gradually begin stacking these slices until the object is complete. Once the object is complete, you can pull it off the bed, remove supports, clean it up if you need to, and use it as you intend to. Now, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them under this YouTube video. If you'd like to access the PDF instructional guide for this lesson, a kind of walkthrough that goes along with the steps, please visit ot3d.org where you can download it for free. I've made some more videos that go more into depth about topics discussed in this video. Check out the description below or on ot3d.org. Happy printing!